You're reading this right now, thinking about it, processing the words, understanding the meaning. Your brain is working, firing neurons, making connections. That's what thinking is, right? Your brain, that 3-pound lump of tissue in your skull, is thinking these thoughts. It's you, the thing doing the reading, the understanding, the experiencing. Your brain is the thinker, except it's not. Your brain isn't thinking, it can't think, it's never thought. Not once in your entire life. And what's actually happening inside your skull right now, the process you call thinking, is so profoundly different from what you imagine that once you understand it, you'll never be able to trust your own mind the same way again. Let me tell you something about neurons. You have about 86 billion of them in your brain. Each one is a cell, a biological machine. It has a cell body, dendrites that receive signals, and an axon that sends signals. And here's what it does. It fires or it doesn't. That's it. A neuron is essentially a switch, an on-off switch. When enough electrical signal comes in through the dendrites, the neuron reaches a threshold and fires an action potential. An electrical spike that travels down the axon to other neurons. Binary, digital, fire or don't fire. That's the entire computational repertoire of a single neuron. It's not thinking, it's switching. Responding to input with output according to simple electrochemical rules. No different in principle from a transistor in a computer. Less sophisticated actually, slower, noisier, more prone to error. And that's it. That's what your brain is made of. 86 billion switches, each one firing or not firing based on the inputs it receives from other switches. No switch knows what it's doing. No switch has any awareness of the bigger picture. A neuron in your visual cortex fires when it detects a vertical line in your field of vision. That's all it knows. Vertical line present, fire. Vertical line absent, don't fire. It has no idea it's part of a visual system. No idea it's helping you see. No concept of what seeing even is. It's just a dumb switch responding to local electrochemical conditions. And every neuron in your brain is like this, simple, local, mechanical, doing one tiny thing in response to input, with no understanding, no awareness, no thought. Do you see what happens? Your brain is a network of 86 billion unconscious switches. None of them are thinking. None of them know anything. None of them understand what you're reading right now. They're just firing in patterns. Patterns determined by the connections between them, the strength of those connections, the timing of incoming signals. It's all automatic, all mechanical. A neuron fires because the electrochemical conditions in its immediate environment crossed a threshold. Not because it decided to fire, not because it thought firing would be useful. It has no choice. It's a deterministic machine responding to physics. Sodium ions flowing across membranes, voltage-gated channels opening and closing, chemistry, just chemistry. And somehow, from 86 billion dumb switches doing chemistry, you emerge. The sense that there's a thinker in here, a you, reading these words, understanding them, thinking about them. But here's the disturbing part. There is no thinker. There's just the pattern. The firing pattern of billions of neurons coordinated across space and time in ways that create the illusion of a unified consciousness. Your thoughts aren't being thought by anything. They're just happening, emerging from the collective dynamics of a network that has no central controller, no executive, no homunculus sitting in a control room pulling levers. Every neuron is doing its own local thing, and the global pattern that results is what you experience as thinking. But the pattern isn't thinking, it's just patterns. Electrochemical activity propagating through a network. No different in kind from waves propagating through water or heat diffusing through metal. Just more complex, more organized, but still just physics. Let's be honest. This is the part that keeps me up at night. Because if your brain isn't thinking, if there's no central processor, no unified self making decisions and having experiences, then what is the you that feels like it's in control? When you decide to lift your hand, what decided? Not you. You are the pattern. And the pattern doesn't decide. It evolves. Input comes in through your senses. That input triggers firing patterns in sensory neurons. Those patterns propagate through the network. interacting with existing patterns created by memory, by prior learning, by ongoing background activity. The patterns interfere, combine, compete, and eventually a pattern emerges that triggers motor neurons. Your hand lifts, and a few hundred milliseconds later you experience the conscious sensation of having decided to lift your hand. But the decision, the actual causal chain that led to the movement, that happened before you were aware of it. Your consciousness is a narrator, not an author. It's describing what the brain already did, not controlling what the brain does. If you want to understand how the universe actually works, not just how it looks, but how it works, hit that subscribe button. Let's find things out together. Stay with me because this gets worse. There's a famous experiment, Benjamin Libet's experiment from the 1980s. He had people sit in front of a clock with a sweeping hand. They were told to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, spontaneously, no external cue. Just decide randomly when to move. And they had to note the position of the clock hand at the moment they became aware of the intention to move. Meanwhile, Libet was measuring their brain activity with EEG, recording the electrical signals from their motor cortex. And here's what he found. The brain activity that precedes movement, the readiness potential, starts ramping up about 500 milliseconds before the movement occurs. But the conscious awareness of intending to move, that happens only about 200 milliseconds before the movement. The brain decides first. Then you become aware of the decision. Then the movement happens. What does that mean? It means your consciousness is late to the party. By the time you feel like you're deciding to do something, your brain has already initiated the process. The feeling of free will, of consciously choosing to act, is a post hoc rationalization. Your brain generates the action, then generates the experience of having chosen the action, and tricks you into thinking the experience caused the action. But it didn't. The causal chain goes unconscious neural processes, action, conscious awareness of intention, not conscious intention, action. You're not steering the ship. You're a passenger watching the view and being told you're the captain. Now I want to take this deeper. Because if neurons are just switches and thinking is just patterns of switches firing, then where does meaning come from? When you read the word dog, you understand what it means. You have a concept of dog, an image, a feeling, a cluster of associations, fur, barking, loyalty, companionship. That meaning feels unified, singular, real. But what is it in the brain? It's not stored in one neuron. There's no dog neuron that contains the concept. Instead, the concept is distributed, spread across thousands or millions of neurons in different regions. Some neurons fire when you see a dog, others when you hear barking, others when you think about companionship. And the pattern of which neurons fire together, how strongly, in what sequence, that pattern is the meaning. The meaning doesn't exist in any single place. It exists in the relationship between neurons, in the structure of the network. Think about what this implies. Meaning is not a thing. It's a pattern of activity, and patterns are transient. They come and go. Right now, you're thinking about dogs because I mentioned dogs. The dog pattern is active in your brain. Neurons are firing in the configuration that represents dog. But 5 minutes from now, you'll be thinking about something else, and those same neurons will be part of a different pattern representing a different concept. The neurons don't belong to dog. They participate in dog sometimes and participate in other concepts other times. They're shared resources. Meaning is what the network is doing at a given moment, not what the network contains. Your thoughts aren't stored objects being retrieved. They're temporary activation patterns being constructed on the fly from the same underlying hardware that constructs all your other thoughts. And here's where it gets truly disturbing. If thoughts are just activation patterns, and those patterns are determined by the structure of the network, then you don't have thoughts. The network has patterns, and you are the experience of those patterns. There's no separate you observing the thoughts. The thoughts are you, or more precisely, the feeling of being you is itself a thought, a pattern, a particularly stable self-referential pattern that the network maintains because it's useful for survival. The sense of self, of being a continuous entity with a past and a future and preferences and goals, that's a construction. a model the brain builds and constantly updates. And like all thoughts, it's distributed, emergent, not located anywhere, not controlled by anything, just happening. Let me bring this to something visceral. Close your eyes for a moment and try to observe your own thinking. Try to catch a thought as it arises. What do you notice? You can't see the thought coming. It just appears, fully formed. You don't feel yourself constructing it. You don't experience the neurons firing, the pattern assembling, the electrochemical cascades propagating through the network. All of that is invisible to consciousness. What you experience is the result, the finished thought, popping into awareness seemingly out of nowhere, and then another thought, and another. A stream of thoughts, each one arising unbidden, with no sense of where it came from or why it appeared when it did. You are not generating these thoughts, you are witnessing them. They're being generated by unconscious processes in your brain, and consciousness is just the screen on which they appear. You're watching your own brain work and mistaking the watching for the working. Think about dreams. When you dream, you experience vivid scenarios, conversations, images, emotions. They feel real in the moment, but you're not creating them consciously. You have no control over what happens in the dream. The narrative unfolds on its own. Characters say things you didn't plan. Events occur that surprise you. Where is that content coming from? From your brain, obviously. From patterns of neural activity generated during sleep. Your brain is creating an entire simulated reality, populating it with characters and events and sensory details, and presenting it to your consciousness as if it were real. And consciousness just goes along for the ride, experiencing it, believing it, until you wake up and realize it was a dream. But here's the thing, waking life is the same process. The same brain generating patterns, creating experiences, and presenting them to consciousness. The only difference is that in waking life, the patterns are constrained by sensory input from the outside world. But the mechanism is identical. You're always dreaming. It's just that when you're awake, reality checks your dream against itself and keeps it consistent. Now here's the truly terrifying implication. If your brain is generating your thoughts, and you are not your brain, but rather a pattern within your brain, then you have never had an original thought. Every thought you've ever experienced was produced by a deterministic network responding to inputs according to its structure. That structure was shaped by genetics and experience, neither of which you chose. You didn't choose your genes, you didn't choose your childhood environment, your early experiences, the formative events that wired your brain in particular ways. Those things happened to you, and they created the network structure you have now. And that structure, interacting with current inputs, produces your thoughts, which means your thoughts are outputs of a process you didn't design and don't control. They feel like yours because you experience them, but they're not generated by you. They're generated by the physics of a biological network, and you are the experience of that generation. A passenger in a vehicle you think you're driving. Let's bring this back to now. Right now you're reading these words and thoughts are arising in response. Maybe resistance. This can't be right. I feel like I'm thinking. I feel like I'm in control. Or maybe fascination. This is disturbing, but it makes sense. Or maybe confusion. I don't understand what he's saying. Whatever you're thinking, notice that you didn't choose to think it. It appeared. You're observing it. You can observe yourself thinking about what I'm saying, but you can't observe the process that generated the thought. That process is unconscious, hidden, running on neural hardware that operates below the threshold of awareness. And it's been running your whole life, generating every thought you've ever had, creating the continuous illusion that you are the thinker rather than the thought. This is what Feynman understood, what neuroscience has confirmed, what nobody wants to accept. Consciousness is not a thing that thinks, it's a thing that experiences. And what it experiences is the output of unconscious neural processes that it has no access to and no control over. The brain does the work. Consciousness takes credit. And we've built our entire conception of selfhood, of agency, of responsibility on that misattribution. We think we're pilots, we're passengers. We think we're authors, we're readers. The story is writing itself and we're just along for the ride, experiencing each sentence as it appears, with no idea what's coming next and no ability to change it even if we did. Here's what makes this beautiful instead of just terrifying. Once you see it, once you really internalize that thoughts are just patterns and patterns just happen, you can stop taking them so seriously. You can stop identifying with every thought that arises. When an anxious thought appears, you don't have to believe it. It's just a pattern your brain generated. Probably because of some past conditioning, some learned association, some current state of your nervous system. It's not truth, it's not you, it's just brain weather, a passing storm of neural activity. And like weather, it will change, new patterns will form, the anxious thought will dissolve, replaced by something else. And you, the awareness observing these patterns, you remain. Not as a thing, not as a thinker, but as the space in which thinking happens, the field in which patterns arise and dissolve. Your brain is not thinking, it's doing chemistry. Complex, beautiful, impossibly intricate chemistry that creates patterns of electrical activity across billions of cells. And those patterns, through mechanisms we barely understand, give rise to experience, to the feeling of being someone, to the sensation that there's a you in here, reading, understanding, thinking. But there's no you separate from the patterns. You are the patterns, temporarily organized, constantly changing, emerging from unconscious processes and dissolving back into them. A thought thinking itself, mistaking the experience for a thinker. The brain doesn't think, it fires, and you are the firing. If this twisted your brain a little bit, good. That means it's working. I'll see you in the next one.